Hello and welcome to Painless Universal, a conversation with myself and Welsh. Today I'll be talking to Tanya. Tanya is the founder of the Communication Doctor. She started this platform after suffering from a burnout. We all do. You work long hours, you get stressed out, and you then have a burnout. Most people don't actually know they're going through a burnout. But luckily, Tanya was able to know she was going through this phase and suffering from a bit of anxiety. And she'll be talking to us about critical issues, about how you need to understand when you're going through a burnout. Another thing I want to understand from Tanya is how do you unlock your creativity and communicate better? We all work in a very stressful, highly intense environment. And sometimes we never know how do we communicate with others to get our message across? How do we use our creativity side to say what we need to say? Tanya has been doing this for many years now, and she'll be going into details with us. Meet Tanya. I'm absolutely delighted to be talking to her. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to Painless Universal Conversation with myself and Welsh. As I said in the introduction, I have Tanya here with me. Tanya is from the Communication Doctor. Tanya, thank you so much for joining me. I did give a very good introduction about you and how you started all this out. Could you first, before we dig into that, could you just tell me a little bit about who is Tanya?
Oh gosh, I love that. I am Tanya. Okay, so when I think about, it's interesting to say who is Tanya, because in terms of from a humble perspective, I am who I am. But I suppose the label that I've given myself, Communication Doctor, I think that's easier for me to say who is Communication Doctor rather than who is Tanya. Just because I have to take myself out from that and look at myself from a different lens. And I'm passionate about communication, but not communication from the aspect of speaking, but communication from a deeper perspective in terms of communicating through the soul, communicating through the mind, communicating through the eyes, communicating through the body, and connecting to people. And that's what I mean by Communication Doctor. That's why I didn't call myself Communication Coach, because doctor has an aspect of healing to it. When you go to see a doctor, you're going through a process and you are healing. And my program, the way my program works is it's coming from a lot of different therapies which I have done myself, and I've put them all together, and it's an amalgamation of those therapies that I do to help people to unlock their creativity and communicate. And that's what I mean by Communication Doctor, because that is what I'm about. That's what Tanya's about.
That's very fascinating, because the key topic for me with you yourself is to talk about that creativity and communication. I see a lot on your blog, your website, and where you talk about creativity and bringing out the communication. But one thing you did stress to us is there's something about burnout. And how does burnout lead to communication issue? And how did your burnout lead you to this path you are on now?
Okay, that was all about self-reflection, because I went through the burnout, and I didn't know that I was going through the burnout. I come from a West Indian family, and one thing I've learned from coming through that family is you put your face on and you get on with it, right? And from that, it's a deep-rooted, I think, like transgenerational resilience as a people and as a family that I have. So I did not notice until having to witness my mum experience dementia and see her for the last 10 years of her life deteriorate. I had so many questions in asking, why is she going through this? What is going on for her? And in questioning what was going on for her, and I started to read books like K.B. Kamon, Carl Jung, and I started to look at psychology and see what goes on within the brain. And then I discovered myself the Burnout book. And as I started to look at all of the symptoms of burnout, I was like, oh, that's what I'm going through right now. Because I was at that point with my mum that I felt like, this is just too much now. Yeah. And I was also at that point with my work where I had a resting point because I was pregnant with my first child. I had that point to reflect, do I go back to work, or do I set up my company? I set up my company in the end. So through that resilience and noticing that about myself, that gave me the spark to go off and say, you know what, I don't want to live this life of unbalance, because I realized that there was no balance in my life. It was all work and no play. I became married to my work.
Yes.
And in marrying to my work, I was neglecting that heart center in myself, that nurturing center in myself, that's about connecting to the people around me. Because when you have an imbalance, either your family suffers or your work colleagues suffer. And that balance is really important. But you have to realize you're going through it. And I feel what I said is the reason I'm shouting about the fact that I've gone through the burnout is because I had no clue at the time. But when I look back, I think a lot of people in the community go through it, but we put a face on it, we put a facade on it, and we just keep going.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true, because people don't realize through burnout you suffer from anxiety, you suffer from so many mental health problems, because when you're tired, your mind is not working anymore. You just can't give it. Your mind is not connected to doing what you need to do. But what is, you have led that burnout and say, okay, I had this burnout issue. This was a big struggle in my life, and I've had to deal with it. I have had to take time out. Did you take time out to get to where you are now, or how did you find that your path to go on to creating the communication doctor?
Well, interestingly enough, it was 2017, I took a year off work because I'd lost both my parents. So my dad died in 2016, December. Mum died the following month. And that year was very painful for me. And I didn't know what was going on. I was so active at the beginning because we had to get the funeral going. I was really kind of prominent in organising the funeral and doing all the things that needed to be done. But when it stopped and the funeral had done and everything had been sorted, it was like, oh my goodness me, now reality has hit home. Then I felt, my God, they're gone. And I feel like being a mother helped me through this, but I would at that time literally drop my children off to school. They feel like they're going off to work because they're like mini adults. So I'd drop them off to school, then I'd come home, I'd get into bed and I'd sleep. And I wouldn't even set my alarm, but I'd know what time to get up. And I did this for a very long time, because when I was sleeping, I realised I was escaping. And then eventually I thought, God, I've got a business to run, because I had lifted and gifted, but I did have teachers that go out. So I have, luckily, thank the Lord, the business works in that way, where I have teachers that go out and they facilitate workshops for me, because I wasn't facilitating any workshop at that time. So thank the Lord for that. But I've switched off to my work and I wasn't engaged with my company. So I was just grieving, basically. I wouldn't even call it depression, because people sometimes like to put that in there. And I feel, actually, no, it was just deep grief. And different people deal with grief in different ways. Sometimes they go back to being their 15-year-old self, or just people do different things. But for me, I went through a process of, I just wanted to escape this world. And if I didn't have children, I don't know what I would have done, because I had to have that structure with picking them up and then making them dinner and being a mum. Yeah, so that helped me to go. But then I did actually see a coach. I can't not mention this woman's name, because at the time I did start working with a sales catalyst at the time, a lady called Kelly Quinn. She called herself a sales catalyst at that time. And I feel like she was deeply spiritual. And I see myself as quite a spiritual being as well. And she was very nurturing at the time. And she helped me to see things differently. And just through working with her, I internally decided that I'm going to do this work on a deeper level. And I said, I wanted to be a counsellor at the time, but then I did some other courses, that was leading towards that. So I didn't do the counselling course, but I really wanted to help people that were going through what I was going through. So I created a program at that time, and I was experimenting with that program. I was basically seeing people and giving them like 20 minutes to just see what I was picking up. And then eventually, just from my exploration, I created my own program, looking at all the certificates that I've got, because I've done so many courses. I'm a bit of a course junkie over time. And I thought, you know what, I need to do something with this. And I can't just sit back as the director of Lifted and Gifted. I think I need to get out there as a consultant and work with people that are going through what I was going through.
Yeah.
And that was a part of a healing, and then it just expanded from there.
That's so good because, you know, if you don't understand grief, you, like you rightly said, people call it all sorts of things. People try to throw in the word depression, and you're right, because it's not really depression. It's something else that people are physically, emotionally dealing with.
Mm.
And until you deal with that, you'll never know how to move on that next level. I think, but through your grief, you found your real calling. And honestly, you really did find your real calling, because you talked about something very crucial, which is something I'm really excited to talk to you about: the creativity and communication, how to bring that out. How do you bring out creativity in communication? How do you unlock that path? Because that's something a lot of people struggle with. People are creative or they could communicate, but they just can't merge the two sometimes. And now I see so many people myself, and I really, struggle to help them in that path to identify that. How did you understand that this is a passion of yours, and you were able to translate that to other people as well?
It goes back to that year that I took out, that year of healing. Because it started off with sleep, and then eventually it started off with me getting some acrylic paints and canvases and painting. And as a young person, I'd say when I was at school, I loved painting, but I didn't do it. So I've done painting in my life. There's points in my life where I've just paint. I'd go in the garden, I'd paint, but it wasn't my career. So I'm not a professional artist in that respect. I was a professional dancer, and interesting, I didn't go to dance. I went to art in terms of creating art. Mm. And I realized there's so many different layers to me. And I suppose I was put in a box as the dancer, choreographer, performer, that sort of person. And that sort of person, I lived that life, enjoyed that life, had success with it. But I had to reach for something else. So it was almost like I was doing that inner child work that was going back to my childhood, that would feel very relaxed when they were painting. So for me, the creativity worked for me in terms of actually opening up something which is in my solar plexus. So your solar plexus kind of lies around your belly area. Mm-hmm. And from a perspective, when I'm looking at spiritual chakras, we all have these chakras, and we tend to hold our confidence and our creativity in that area. So I knew that I had to unlock some of that energy within my gut, within my solar plexus, and release it. And as I was releasing that, that was opening up my throat chakra, so I could communicate. Now there are things that I do in terms of hypnotherapy and unconscious work that I do with people to unlock that. And for me, it was the artwork, but for different clients that I've worked with, it's different things. Some people, it may be within writing. It's not always the obvious. So as I said, the obvious thing for me was to go and dance around, but that's natural for me. So it was almost like it happened through art. So it's not always the obvious. Yes. But when you do the inner child work, you can connect with that inner child. And that sometimes can help you either unlock a block that's holding you back, because sometimes it can be ugly when you go back to your childhood, or it could be beautiful.
Yeah.
So it's about going on a journey with self. And I do a lot of that work from this perspective of the therapy work. Yeah.
Communication is such an important thing, especially when you have to deal with the lockdown we're probably going to face in the UK.
Yeah.
People will now need a new way of communicating, because communicating, especially when you talk to people, you talk to them physically, you have that connection instantly. But having the Zoom way of working, the new way of working, which might be here to stay for a while, we need to unlock how to connect and communicate better with people through distant channel. Is that something can you share with us a way someone could communicate and bring out that spark, their mojo in that way to people?
you know, it's brilliant because I've been writing a blog just this week. And because things happen all the time, and I've not put the blog out yet, but I will. When I do, I'll tag you. But it's about looking at things through a different lens. So it's interesting, we've both got artwork up, and the reason I'll use this as an example. When I look at art, you can look at realism and abstract. I'm just going to, because you've got all different types of art, but I'm just going to pick those two because they're so opposite to each other, like they're polar opposites. Yeah. And as you can see, just on my screen here, I have Picasso's work, which is abstract. Yeah. I don't know the work. Who's the artist that you have there? In the background?
I honestly, these were gifts. My husband, yes, and I've not even taken the time out to understand know who they are, but I should ask him.
Okay, well, basically, so sorry to put you on the spot there, but as I look at it, I'm seeing realism, yeah? So sometimes you have realism and you have abstract, and when you're looking at things through a different lens, the realist paints what they see, the abstract paints what they feel. And if you put this into different characters and different personalities, right? Some people see something as it is, and some people see it. It's almost like spirituality, like colours, yes, or a jumble, like how Picasso saw things, or sometimes within African art. And if we can put the abstract and the realist together in a perspective of respecting the realism and respecting each other, the abstract, and they overlap, they can help each other, they can support each other. And it's almost like you can see it as a straight line. The realists is seeing what they see, they want to get to A to B, they have a strategy. The abstract wants to explore, it wants to hop over to different sides and explore what it feels like to be hot, what it feels like to be cold before they land. And in that exploration is like brainstorming, comes the juice. Yeah. The realist would like to put it all together. It's like the strategist, it's like the logic. Yes, so you need to work together. And sometimes what happens in life is you'll have the realists working together and the abstract working together. But that doesn't create anything. And if I like to use Steve Jobs as an example, because Steve Jobs, I can't remember the guy that he worked with, he was a creative. I think it was Steve Wozniak, don't quote me on this, but he was a strategist. And that's how you grow in business. You have to work with your polar opposites. And that means you have to respect that polar opposite. You have to respect what that person is bringing to the table, and you have to see what you bring to the table. But that requires you as a person to look through a different lens. And often in life, we can only look through our own lens. We just see things from our own perspective. But that's where the real growth happens and the real self-development happens, when we're okay to look through different lenses. And that's how I look at it.
I love that. I love that, because I think when you see things through, and sometimes it could be actually balancing it off someone else. You could have a conversation with someone just to see it. Like, you might have an opinion, but it's always nice to balance it off. And I love that. I love the way you've just said that, because it's very, very true. And a lot of us don't sit back and think about it that way. We just assume black is black and white is white, but sometimes you have to look at it in a different way or get someone else to help you analyze it. But in everything you do, in your communication, one of the key things you also focus on is mental health. You're very vocal about mental health. What would be your tip for getting anyone who's going through a mental health battle right now? What would be your tip to getting anyone to deal with it and tackle that pain and move on and find their joy along the way?
Oh, beautiful. Well, number one, I always start by saying we all have mental health. Mental illness is something different, but when we are honest with ourselves, everybody in this world will have some form of anxiety, but just on different levels. Yeah, we all, as human beings, we all got some element, but it depends on what level it is at. That's the first thing I would say. But if someone is struggling with anxiety or depression or those sorts of things with regards to mental health, it's going to be different for different people. And that's why I don't call myself a coach, because not one size fits all. Now, I would always suggest, in the past, I've suggested this, I have suggested
Yeah,
that these things, utilization, full
yeah,
utilization.
it's fully it's part of the conversation here. Yeah.
This means that you're such an important woman. You need to get hold of it. I need to get hold of you. So, in terms of what was I saying there? So, just in terms of mental health, for me, I'd always say to my clients, if you're going through something, journal. But for some people, they don't journal, they can't journal, you know? So it's finding out what works for that person. That's why I say not one size fits all.
Yeah.
So for me, it's journaling, and sometimes for my clients, it could be journaling. For somebody else, it could be just going every single day, just go for a walk in the park, go and walk somewhere. If they're not getting out of the house, go for a walk, you know. For someone else, you may need to go to a boxing class. You may need to box it out. You really may need to, you may have pumped up anger that you need to punch it out, you know. So everyone, because we're all different archetypes, and I think that's what we don't always see when we're working with people, that we are different. So with regards to mental health, in terms of how we can cope with what's going on, the first thing we need to understand is what is triggering us right now? What are you triggered by? So when I get triggered, I get excited. I'm always like, yes, I'm triggered. Because from a mental health perspective or from a therapy's perspective, when you can recognize what you're triggered by and you know what to do about it, it's an exciting point because it's revelation. You know, it's like a revelation. So if I feel triggered by something, I may have to put it in my writing, or I may have to go and paint, because that's how I deal with it. Someone else may have to go and run and think and reflect, but that's where the reflection comes. So if you can't get to that point that you're triggered, then you're not really doing the work in terms of from a therapeutic perspective. You're just staying in the light, or you're just staying in the dark. So we sometimes have to come up to surface. We have to have these interactions with people that reflect our shadow self, so we can see ourselves. And when we see ourselves, we can accept that shadow side as well as that light side and be complete with it. But in life, it's constant. The triggers are constant. Yeah. But it's recognizing them. Yeah.
My final question is, you really answered that one so well. I was going to dig into it, but you really got straight to it. So that was really now. My final question is really about the communication doctor, because I understand you work with teachers, you work with senior execs, in different people in different, different aspect of life. Find alternative and more positive way of working. It is so difficult especially in today's situation with the whole pandemic and everything going on in today's world. There's so much hate, there's so much, negativity, and that affects people's work. It affects people retaining staff at work. It affects kids going to school. How do you teach? What are your key message to people out there that you would, message of hope that you give out to people to, keep that stamina going in finding alternative method of communicating the negative to people?
First of all, it all starts with self and understanding yourself. So when I work with my clients, I don't go out looking for people. People come to me, because I feel it's about the law of attraction as well. So you're going to be attracted to me for whatever reason, and the universe is going to bring you to me for whatever. Obviously, I do my marketing, but you're attracted to that person, yeah. So, but once you start the work with whoever you're working with, it all starts from self. And as a leader, sometimes you're right. There is negative, like right now, there's so much negativity in the world. You have to show up. You have to come strong in terms of, I'm going to look at this from a perspective of being empathic, in terms of connecting with what I'm feeling in my environment. I'm going to acknowledge the people around me and acknowledge their pain, acknowledge their journey, and also acknowledge the love. And when you speak from that perspective, I think that Barack Obama is a good example of that with regards to leadership, because he's coming at it as, I'm going to step into your shoes, I can see what's going on. And then he has that great, lovely speech, together, yes, we can achieve. Yeah. It's interesting, I'm talking about Barack now, and we've got the Professor get on, but I don't think they can match up to Barack, to be honest, but that's just a personal. But the whole idea of leadership is about having that sensitivity to understand who you are leading and to be able to see things from everybody's perspective. Yeah. So I feel when you are leading, you need to come with empathy, connection, but then also you have to be able to model that behavior because you are constantly being watched. And once you model that behavior, other people will mirror it in a positive way. Even from an NLP perspective, because we mirror behaviors, you know, or even from children as a mother, your child mirrors you. Yeah. So when your child's going through something, so a lot of the time you have to look at yourself and think, well, what have I taught them? What have I modeled to my child? And it's the same thing. I use that as a mother, but it's the same thing as a leader. What are you modeling to your team? So that's where it starts. And even right now, we've got to, the resilience has to kick in, and you've got to shine your light, and you've got to look for those light moments in the dark space. And as a leader, you've got to shine that light. That is so true. And this morning I had a lovely interaction with a mum. Actually, she was walking to, I just dropped my kids off and we were walking and she was late. And I said to her, don't be hard on yourself. Yeah. Don't be hard on yourself. I said, you're getting your kid into school every single day. Yeah. You're only about 5 minutes late. Because I just saw her, I said, don't be hard on yourself, because at the end of the day, you're going every day and you're a good mother. I just sat to her and she had a tear rolling down her eye. And that is, I feel, I'm just, I'm doing that from a parent's perspective, but that's an aspect of leadership. Yes. Because she'll walk away and feel, you know what, it's not all bad, she's right. So you look for the light in everything that someone's doing instead of looking for the negative. Wow. That's leadership. Well, Tanya, that's amazing. And I'm really glad you joined me on having this conversation, unlock your creativity, to find your communication. I mean, that is such a, such a passionate thing that a lot of people need to hear, because in times like this, we don't know how to communicate, or we will know, but we don't know if we're doing it right or wrong. And I think your message is absolutely clear. Thank you so much, Tanya, for this amazing time you spent with me this morning and on Painless Universal. Thank you. Thank you very much. It was lovely. Thank you for inviting me on the show as well. I really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.